A parched San Diego gets a much-needed soaking, but the rain also brings flooding, power outages, crashes, and mudslides.
It was cold and it was raining and it was wet. And there's a lot of people, like crazy people around us.
The rain also created challenges for the city's homeless population who don't always get the call when emergency shelters open up.
She asked me, if we found you a bigger house, would you be willing? I told her, I would be willing, yes, but I don't have any trust.
And an update on an investigation into questionable practices by a local refugee resettlement agency. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. San Diego got its first significant rainfall of the season today, and with it, overflooding riverbanks and flooded streets. Some areas of San Diego are prone to flooding, like Mission Valley, Sorrento Valley, and the Tijuana River Valley. San Diego's River Rescue is asking people to obey signs and barricades blocking flooded areas. And if there's no signage, but there's flooding, don't try to cross water if you can't tell how deep it is.
We know that a foot of moving water will move a vehicle, and certainly if you're trying to walk through that or bike through it, you can get knocked down pretty easily.
Today's rain caused several road closures around the county, and the California Highway Patrol logged dozens of rain-related crashes. We are tracking the storm over San Diego. Aaron Calandra has more on your rainfall totals.
It's been a stormy day here in Southern California. Look at all of this precipitation across San Diego County. Those yellow and orange dots, well, those indicate some heavier downpours. And we certainly saw some today. Oceanside coming in with the most rain so far, about 2.2 inches. Mount Laguna, 1.84 inches. San Diego proper, about 1.3. So that's a good thing because it's been awfully dry. We've been dry on our scale here for quite some time. It's been very gusty as well. Look at some of these wind gusts up to 73 miles per hour. The good news is the rain is starting to move out. So as you go to bed tonight, it's going to get a lot quieter. I'll have a full look at your forecast in just a few minutes.
San Diego's wet and blustery weather prompted city officials to open its emergency homeless shelters. KPBS reporter Susan Murphy has more from Father Joe's Villages near downtown, where 250 additional beds were set up.
When the temperature dips below 50 degrees and there's a good chance for rain, this dining hall is converted into an emergency homeless shelter. These tables are moved to make room for cots. It's a temporary reprieve from the harsh conditions on the streets.
Last night was really the first night this season that we've had a substantial amount of rain.
Deacon Jim Vargas with Father Joe's Villages says 99 people came in out of the rain for a warm bed and a couple of meals.
A number of them were families and children, and we will continue to do that throughout this winter season when the need arises.
The city of San Diego contracts with Father Joe's to provide the added shelter space during inclement weather. They open their doors from about 4 o'clock in the afternoon until 5 the next morning at a cost of approximately $5,000 per night.
We allow companion animals to be brought in, and also we do realize that people have possessions, and so we allow that as well, within reason, obviously. I mean, because there's just a limited amount of space, so physics just allows just so much stuff.
Last night, the emergency shelter was just half full. Vargas says the opening of the shelter was announced by word of mouth and the county's 211 system. Anna Marquez says she wishes she had known about it. She spent the night with her 2 children in a downtown park. She says they're on a shelter waiting list.
So we're waiting for them to call us. They haven't called us.
Her daughter Sarah Marquez says their night was miserable.
It was cold and it was raining and it was wet. And there's a lot of people, like crazy people around us.
The Marquez family was sitting outside the downtown library early this morning. They were waiting for the doors to open, along with 100 other people wearing wet shoes and lugging overstuffed bags. One of them was Lonnie Oliver. He had been waiting for hours under the library overhang after spending much of his night on the streets.
It was drizzling and just pouring rain, wind blowing everywhere.
Oliver plans to stay at Father Joe's emergency shelter tonight. Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
At least 13 people were killed in mudslides in Santa Barbara County today. Houses were torn from their foundations as downpours sent mud and boulders roaring down hillsides in an area scorched by wildfire last month. Officials issued mandatory evacuation orders ahead of the rainstorms on Monday to more than 20,000 people, but say only about 10 to 15% heeded that warning. Closer to home, areas impacted by the recent lilac fire are also experiencing flooding, but so far no reports of mudslides. Alex Tardy with the National Weather Service says that's thanks in part to the relatively flat terrain.
This is an ideal situation given that it hasn't rained all year, literally almost. We've got a fresh burn scar, even though it is not a steep terrain. We're not going to see a massive wall of water per se, but we're going to see a situation where sandbags and cleaning out of drains and diverting water into a ditch will be very helpful for individual persons' homes and their yards.
By this time of year, San Diego usually has a rainfall total close to 3 inches, but ahead of this storm, only 0.09 inches of rain had fallen since October 1st. People living in the unincorporated area of the county are seeing steady amounts of rainfall, too. That includes areas like Bonsall and Fallbrook. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman says the recent fires make them especially vulnerable to erosion.
We were particularly concerned about the lilac fire burn area.
The County of San Diego is working to protect areas recently devastated by wildfires.
We opened up an erosion control homeowners assistance center in Bonsall. We're definitely concerned that any rain that falls on a burnt land surface, burnt soil, is just going to flow right off.
The county's flood control district says in general, recent rains have not been very destructive.
In the unincorporated areas, we have not seen roads that have been damaged. We have not seen channels, flood control channels that have been damaged.
This weather center in Kearney Mesa is where the county monitors rainfall using hundreds of different sensors.
So as the water raises in the creek bed and it comes up to approach the road or goes over the top of the road, we get notified real time.
And before heading out in the rain, you can now get your own real-time weather updates.
We have web cameras that are on some of these low-lying roads, so you can go on to our Flood Control District webpage and actually check out the condition of the road.
Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
The death toll from the flu continues to rise in San Diego County with an added 46 deaths reported last week. But KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg says the number of new flu cases has declined.
County health officials say there was a 32% drop in the number of new flu cases last week compared to the previous week. The percentage of flu-related visits to emergency rooms also declined. Dr. James Watt is chief of the Division of Communicable Disease Control for the California Department of Public Health. He says the number of flu-related deaths statewide is up compared to the same time last year.
It's possible that that number is higher because the season just started earlier. It's also possible that this is going to be a higher year for deaths. That's something we're going to need to continue to monitor.
Watt says it's not too late to get a flu shot. He says the shot may not be 100% effective, but it can still reduce complications if someone becomes ill. Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.
State health officials are calling this flu season one of the worst on record and say the major strain circulating this time has been known to cause the most severe cases of the illness.
Some people feel that they don't get severe symptoms when they have the flu, and that's generally true until you do get a very severe case of the flu. And this would be the year if you're going to get a severe case when we have this H3N2 strain circulating. This would be the year that one really has increased chances of getting severe influenza.
The season is expected to last at least another 2 months. President Trump urged a bipartisan compromise today on immigration. He presided over a meeting with Republican and Democratic lawmakers seeking a deal on DACA. That's the program ending in March that protects hundreds of thousands of young immigrants brought to the country illegally as children.
I feel having the Democrats in with us is absolutely vital, because this should be a bipartisan bill. This should be a bill of love. Truly, it should be a bill of love, and we can do that.
After the meeting, congressional Republicans and Democrats expressed optimism for a deal just 10 days before a government shutdown deadline. Resettling refugees in San Diego is challenging because of housing cost. Last summer, a KPBS investigation found one nonprofit resettlement agency was placing families in homes that were too small. Some of those families were asked by their landlords to leave. KPBS reporter Taryn Minto followed up with some of those families to see what's changed.
Samir Zain Al-Abidin calls in Arabic to his youngest daughter, Jana. The toddler wobbles barefoot around the fenced-in yard of the family's new home. Al-Abidin guides her to a basketball that she kicks across the lawn filled with toys from her 5 siblings. The family of 8 recently moved to the 3-bedroom house from a 2-bedroom apartment. Al-Abidin says the change is a welcome one.
The kids have taken comfort. They are comfortable. It's true that it is expensive, but we are comfortable.
The family was asked to vacate the first apartment because it violated occupancy guidelines with its large size. A KPBS investigation found the Al-Abidins were one of 7 families placed under false leases into cheaper, smaller homes by the International Rescue Committee. The resettlement agency says after KPBS's report, it conducted an internal review that found 24 affected families. Acting Director Murray Cronin-Mather told KPBS the agency has since taken corrective actions and offered to help those impacted.
Immediately after the investigation confirmed that there were some of these practices and we identified these families, we reached out to each of those families to do a home visit with them to explain the situation and their options and what support they may want from us that we could provide.
Al-Abidin says the IRC assisted him by making calls to inquire about apartments he found. But ultimately, he says community members helped him move to his current home.
She told me about the address and the details, and so they helped me with the procedures and to move.
Things didn't work out the same for Mohammed Abdullah. The family of 8 is still in the 2-bedroom apartment where the IRC placed them in 2016. Abdullah says he'd like to relocate, but has trouble qualifying for a larger home with his low income.
We don't have a sponsor to get the house. Secondly, they want the credit to be above 3,000, and I've only been working. It's been a week since I started a new job.
He says the IRC did contact him after KPBS's initial story. An employee asked him if he wanted help finding a new place. He says he was open to it, but told the employee he didn't have faith in the agency.
She asked me, if we found you a bigger house, would you be willing? I told her, I would be willing, yes, but I don't have any trust.
He says he hasn't heard from the IRC since about housing and that he worries he'll be notified to leave any day. However, the IRC says Abdullah's account isn't consistent with the agency's records, but did not provide details. As of December, 2 other families previously interviewed by KPBS are still living in apartments that are too small. One has been asked to leave. Another family says it moved to Michigan because it was more affordable. The IRC reiterated that it reached out to affected families and offered assistance with new housing, although some chose to remain in their current homes. Taryn Minto, KPBS News.
Many high-tech firms in California rely on the H-1B visa program to hire foreign workers. Republican Congressman Issa and Democrat Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren have a bipartisan bill aimed at closing what they call loopholes in the current program. KQED Newsroom's Thuy Vu talked to both legislators about the bill.
Congressman Issa joins us from KPBS in San Diego, and Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren is in San Jose. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congressman Issa, what is the biggest problem you see right now with the H-1B visa program as it stands?
Well, the biggest challenge is to allocate a limited resource to the best and the brightest and most needed. Of the 65,000 slots that we're changing the rules on, about 40% go to relatively low-skilled consulting jobs, often displacing American workers. And we know that there are at least 65,000 employment opportunities in high-skilled areas, masters and PhDs in the STEM field, that companies like Facebook and Google and others would fill if they could get those slots. So we just want to see that and Congresswoman Lofgren has been great on this, the highest paying, the most skilled, the most needed are the first in line, and this goes a part of the way toward doing that.
And so how would your legislation reform the program?
Well, what it does is it takes care of what you called an introduction loopholes, which have a lot to do with history. 25 years ago, they said if you pay $60,000, you can get around certain proofs or attestations. Well, you can imagine that over a couple of decades, $60,000 really should be $90,000 or $100,000 just to be equal dollars.
And Congresswoman Lofgren, you normally oppose Republican immigration policies, yet you helped to write this bill. Why?
Well, it's a small measure, honestly. I had a bill that was more dramatic reform of the program, but this bill makes some incremental changes that improve the current situation, and therefore I thought it was worth pursuing because it's better than the status quo. There are several problems with the H-1B program. One is the outsourcing issue where you have low-paid H-1B visa holders come in, essentially replace American employees. Sometimes the Americans are even forced to train the foreign workers, and that is really not what the H-1B program was for. This bill will help on that. We'll see if it actually fixes it, but we hope that it will by requiring recruitment and prohibiting displacement and actually requiring disbarment of firms if they don't live up to their obligations.
The Trump administration is now reportedly drafting a proposal that would require H-1B visa holders to leave the country while their green card applications are being processed. Currently, they're allowed to stay. What do you think of that, Mr. Issa?
Well, there's a couple of areas. One is we need a broader bill that lifts the per-country cap, because often the reason they're waiting so long is they're from a particular country that has a long waiting list versus a short one. There's also a fix in our companion bill that Senator Hatch offered in the Senate, where it has a conditional green card process. So it would formalize who gets to stay beyond an H-1. And I believe that if we can get this out of the House in the next couple of weeks, working with Senator Hatch, we can come up with an acceptable bipartisan approach. But at the same time, we shouldn't have somebody stay for X amount of years and then lose them from the workforce. There's no logical reason to do that if we can provide fixes that get beyond the current, some people staying for 14 or 15 years in this in-between state.
And Congresswoman Lofgren, I want two things I want to get to real quickly before we run out of time here. The Trump administration regarding offshore oil and gas drilling, it's now saying it would allow it on most U.S. coastal waters, including California. What is your reaction to that?
I think that's a terrible idea. It used to be that Californians in the House from both parties would elbow each other out of the way to introduce bills to prevent oil drilling off the coast of California, and I hope that there's a way to stop that. But I want to go back to the issue that Daryl raised, which is, young, talented people. We have a pool of a couple of million young, talented people, and they're called DACA recipients. We ought to have a bipartisan, urgent discussion on how to keep those kids in a safe spot. They are losing their status now, nearly 120 a day. Some have committed suicide on the idea that they might be sent back to some country they don't even know. So I'm happy to work on this tiny reform bill with Daryl. Maybe we can do bigger reform, but we've got this talented pool of young people that we should not be neglecting, and let's have some bipartisan discussion to fix that.
You can see more of that interview on kqed.org. Former Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio says he's running for U.S. Senate. Arpaio is looking to replace Senator Jeff Flake, who is retiring. The 85-year-old lawman avoided a possible jail sentence last year when President Trump pardoned his criminal conviction for disobeying a judge's order to stop traffic patrols that targeted immigrants. Arpaio is notorious for jailing inmates in outdoor tents during triple-digit heat and conducting dozens of immigration crackdowns. Arpaio tweeted this morning he's running to, quote, support the agenda and policies of President Donald Trump in his mission to make America great again. After 24 years as sheriff, Arpaio lost his last election bid in 2016 to a little-known Phoenix police sergeant. Mexican officials have arrested a suspect in the fatal shooting of Douglas Bradley. The Imperial Beach official who was killed while vacationing in southern Mexico. The Attorney General for the Mexican state of Guerrero has identified the suspect as Isidro, a.k.a. El Chiro. Mexican authorities say he shot Bradley after an argument with several people at a bar. Bradley was the administrative service director for Imperial Beach and had gone to Ixtapa, Zihuatanejo on a surfing trip for his 50th birthday in late December. Now that marijuana is legal in California, state lawmakers want to make it easier for people to clean up their criminal records. A bill introduced today by a Bay Area assemblyman would make it the responsibility of the courts, not the individual, to remove misdemeanor convictions for marijuana possession. Some felony convictions would also be eligible.
Some individuals don't even know that they qualify right now. And if they do, they don't know how. And if they do know how, they might not have the resources to execute it. So there's so many barriers, so many obstacles, so many pitfalls along the way. We really should streamline it, make it easier.
When voters passed Prop 64 to legalize marijuana, they also passed a provision that allows for records to be cleared. However, it's currently up to the individual to begin that process. The California Office of Traffic Safety has pulled an ad warning about the dangers of impaired driving because critics say it promotes marijuana use. The ad begins with a variety of testimonials from people who use the drug. It wasn't until near the end of that ad talked about the risks of driving stoned. The Office of Traffic Safety says it shares critics' concerns and pledges to clarify the message in the future. It's the start of election season, and tomorrow the city of San Diego will consider several proposals for the June ballot. 4 of them aim to change school board elections in San Diego Unified. Each would add term limits and eliminate at-large elections so trustees are elected only by the communities they represent.
The President of the United States is term limits. You've got the mayor of every city is term limits. You've got city council, their term limits. And by having term limits allows more change. Our position is that we need change in the San Diego Unified School District.
Trustee Richard Barrera has said such reform efforts are driven by politics, not what's best for kids. Tomorrow, he and his colleagues will propose forming a committee to explore putting forward their own ballot measure in November. It was the calm between the storms here at Ocean Pier. While rain pelted the region most of the day, a sunny window opened up late morning. It didn't last long, though. Blustery winds picked back up late this afternoon, and wet weather is expected to last through the night, including some possible thunderstorms. But tomorrow is a whole new day. Aaron Calandra has tonight's forecast.
Hopefully you had a nice day today, although a damp day. Take a look at our radar and satellite. We had a lot of rain in places. The orange, the yellow, and even some reds, those indicate some downpours. We had some of them today across California. Let's take a look at the bigger picture. A wet day, but a beneficial day. We need this rain. It is awfully dry around here. So about 2.2 inches in Oceanside. They take place number 1 for the most rain so far. In Mount Laguna, 1.8 inches, and in Alpine 1.2. Chula Vista, less than an inch, but hey, anything is good. It's also awfully gusty. Some wind gusts up to 73 miles per hour. So power outages are a real possibility, and also some difficult traveling. As I said, this is a beneficial rain. It's been dry, even in a moderate drought in some places. So that's going to help take care of that issue. Tonight, some rumbles of thunder through San Diego. 55 degrees for our overnight low. And taking a look across the region, it's still going to be wet in most of the areas. Ramona 47, Chula Vista 56, and Oceanside 47 degrees. Wednesday, a completely new day. It's going to be drier, lots of sunshine. The morning is going to start off still wet. We will have leftover showers in places, but as the day progresses, those showers are going to be going away. So Mount Laguna 49 degrees for the high, Poway 66, San Diego 63, and Oceanside 65 degrees. Taking a look at the national map, the East Coast is a mess. It's cold, it's wet, some ice, some snow, but the West Coast staying nice and dry. And as we take a look at the next couple of days, Wednesday, some rain is expected to continue, and then Thursday through Sunday, it's going to stay mostly sunny and nice. Temperatures on the rise to those mid-70s. Inland, a wet day Wednesday. You'll still need the umbrella, but then improvement. It will be drier and sunny. Temperatures up to the 80s for the weekend. In the mountains, in the 40s, and wet Wednesday. Kind of a yucky day. But then Thursday through Sunday, lots of sunshine. Temperatures creeping up to the 60s. And in the deserts again, Wednesday's the wet day, a shower or two, and then drying out with sunshine. Temperatures in the 70s. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra. Ebony, back to you.
You can find tonight's stories at kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.